A fleet of Russian warships reached Cuban waters this week, sparking memories of the Cuban Missile Crisis just days after the Biden administration approved Ukrainian forces using U.S. weaponry to strike targets in Russia. Among the flotilla is a nuclear-powered submarine, though Russian officials have denied that the submarine is carrying nuclear weapons. Now, what does this say about the U.S. standing on the international stage with Russian warships operating within miles of U.S. territorial waters? Joining me now to discuss this and much more, Senator Pete Ricketts from Nebraska. He serves on 3 Senate committees, including the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator Ricketts, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tony, for having me on. I appreciate it.
So Russian vessels offshore, curiously timed as the G7 summit takes place. Is this a clear reaction by Vladimir Putin to the green light from the Biden administration to give Ukraine the ability to use U.S. weapons to attack Russia?
I actually think it's a bigger picture of Biden just in general projecting weakness on the world stage, starting with the disastrous pullout of Afghanistan, but leading to all the events we've seen, including the attack on Israel October 7th. You know, we have not had a Russian fleet doing military exercises in this hemisphere since 2008 when Obama was president. And that was by Venezuela, not off the coast of Florida, 90 miles away. So this is something that is really a result of Biden just being weak and Putin understanding that he can push the United States around because we've got such a weak president.
Now, this particular nuclear submarine, now the Russians are downplaying that this poses a threat, but normally this is armed with a hypersonic missile that can travel 9 times the speed of sound, basically 7,000 miles per hour. That makes it just seconds from hitting the U.S. We almost came to a nuclear confrontation back in the 60s over this. I mean, what's changed since then other than weak leadership?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just part of when we project weakness, our adversaries, people that are dictators like Putin, are going to take advantage of it and really try to intimidate us. And frankly, unfortunately, with the Biden administration's appeasement first policies, they get away with it, right? These dictators around the world can think they can push us around. And with Biden, they've been successful in being able to do it. What we need is a president like President Trump, who is going to stand up and let the dictators know that if they step out of line, there's going to be severe consequences. These dictators were afraid of President Trump when he was president, and we need to bring him back so that we can, again, regain our standing on the world stage. And frankly, one of the things everybody should ask themselves right now, do you feel like America and our allies are safer today, 3 years after Joe Biden, or 3.5 years after Joe Biden's been in office? And I don't think there's anybody who can, with a straight face, say, yeah, we're safer today under Joe Biden, because it's simply not true.
Senator Ricketts, you serve on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Foreign Affairs Committee. Should we be concerned as Americans about this, and if so, why?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, again, this is part of an overall strategy where our adversaries in Russia, People's Republic of China, Iran, North Korea, they are pushing the edge of the envelope and really destabilizing the world, but also putting us at risk. Again, you mentioned how fast these hypersonic missiles can travel. The Russians say there's no nuclear weapons on this. I don't know why anybody would believe what the Russians are saying. Certainly, when they tried to put missiles in Cuba back in the 1960s, they lied about that then, too. So this is something where we're putting ourselves at risk by allowing the Russian military in this hemisphere. And so we need a president who's going to push back on that and end this practice. And that president, sadly, is not Joe Biden, because he's the one that is allowing this to happen.
What steps could a president determined to protect America and American interests do at this point?
Well, I think one of the things we have to do is really start enforcing our sanctions and making sure that they're having a bite on our adversaries. For example, one of the things that the Biden administration has done is loosened up the sanctions on Iran to allow them to get a bunch of oil money. Frankly, Putin's benefiting from the same thing. We're allowing people to buy oil from Russia. President Trump ended China buying oil from Iran. And that's what we have to do, is we have to go to our allies and even our adversaries and say, hey, if you're buying oil from Russia, if you're buying oil from Iran, we're going to shut that down. We need to take a strong stance with this stuff. Again, Iran was almost broke under President Trump. They had almost no foreign reserves left. They weren't able to fund the Hezbollah or the Hamas or the Houthis or anybody like that. And under Biden, we've loosened all that up so they've had, billions of dollars going to them. And that's how they can afford to fund things like the attack on October 7th on Israel. And frankly, it's the same thing with Putin. We got to shut this down. We can't allow them to get these oil revenues. We've got to support our allies when they're trying to get off of Russian energy. But again, the Biden administration has shut down, the LNG, our liquid natural gas exports to Europe at a time when we're trying to get them to stop using Russian gas. The policies of the Biden administration just make us weaker.
Right. So we need these policies backed by a strong military, because if we do both, we won't have to use a strong military. It's the best deterrent. I want to switch gears, Senator Ricketts. For the first time in quite some time, former President Donald Trump was on Capitol Hill, met this morning with House members and this afternoon with Senate Republicans. The theme of the meeting appeared to be unity. Tell us about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great meeting. It was very unifying. The president came in and said, hey, I support you 1,000%. We need Republicans ready to go when he gets elected president to start enacting his agenda right away. The things he talked about doing were fighting inflation, and specifically around energy policy, making sure that we were developing our energy resources. It's a national security issue. It would help bring down energy prices. It would help bring down inflation by doing so. That was a big deal. We talked about having a strong Navy. You mentioned having a strong military. Obviously, President Trump believed in that, did it when he was president. He'll do it again. This administration, the Biden administration, is actually reducing the size of our Navy at a time when Russian warships are in our hemisphere. And to your point, we've got to have a strong military. My colleague Roger Wicker wrote an op-ed that was really around how we have to invest to have a stronger Navy and a stronger military in general. But the president also talked about the things he wanted to do to secure the border. He talked about, a great idea, I think, which is tips for hourly workers, making those tax-free. The Biden administration has made the burden of reporting taxes on tips harder. So if you got your server at a restaurant, it's actually harder for that person. More paperwork to be able to report their tips. President Trump's like, well, why don't we just make those tips tax-free? I think that's a fantastic idea. It would help those families that are relying on those hourly wages to be able to cope with this high inflation that Biden created. Yeah. So it really was a great meeting. I can't say enough good things about the president coming in and how upbeat he was. We're feeling very, very good about his opportunity to be reelected. And when he gets reelected, we need to move fast to enact his agenda. Yeah,
absolutely, to correct all that has been done over the last 4 years. Senator, always great to see you. Thanks so much for taking time to join us.
Great. Thank you very much for having me on.